Great. Well, I suppose I made you guys read the Bible and read the Bible verses. I suppose it's my turn being I haven't read them yet. So I've got my nice little Bible here that I've got marked, but I'm going to put this down, and actually I'm going to grab a little piece of paper here because I'm going to read it in a little bit of a different way. So it says, Matthew 7:24 through 27. It says, "Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and acts on them will be like a sensible man who built his house on a rock." Like a sensible man. Joel, are you back there? Are you my sensible man? Dude, why don't you go ahead and jump on your foundation? Well, as Joel gets on his foundation, he forgot to look at hose got stuck, sorry. He forgot to look at the weather forecast because it says right here, the rain fell, the rivers rose, and the winds. So the rains fell. This big rainstorm. Big rainstorm. And the winds blew, but we don't have the winds. And it pounded. But what did it say? His house stood strong because it's on a rock. But yet, it didn't collapse because the foundation was rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and doesn't act like them will act like the foolish man who built his house on the sand. Mr. Lawton, come on out here and stand on your house. Get on your house. Yes. Then again, it said, the rain fell. Oh, he forgot to take his glasses off. It really fell. Big storm. And the wind blew, and it pounded his house. And it collapsed. And the collapse was great. Thank you, guys. Now, we could go ahead and we can leave it. That's a nice, cute little story and a nice, cute little object lesson, and we created a big mess. But the mess gets picked up. But that's just the end of what God was actually talking about. So if we take a look at that, that was a nice, big, bright red letters. And he said a lot of things. God said a lot of things before that. So that was in chapter 7. So if we go back to the beginning of where God actually started talking, and we see in chapter 5 that he started talking. It was called the Sermon on the Mount. And he talked about what it means to be blessed. He talked about the salt and the light. He talked about the fulfillment of the law, which is a fulfillment of him. He talked about murder. He talked about adultery. He talked about divorce. He talked about oaths and promises. He talked about eye for an eye. He talked about loving our enemies. He talked about giving to the needy. He talked about how to pray. He talked about why to pray. He talked about fasting. He talked about treasures in heaven and how to get to heaven. He talked about do not worry. He talked about judging. He talked about seeking him. He talked about trees and fruit. He talked about the foolish and wise builders. So he talked about all those foundational things, and then he said, if you are smart, you would build your foundation on those things, and that's what would happen. If you didn't, that's what your foundation would look like. When we look at this, we're only going to look at 3 pieces because we could talk many weeks on foundations. But we're going to talk about 3 pieces of foundations that have everlasting value in our lives. The first one is our spirit, or our child spirit. It's who we are. It is the communicator between us and God. It is the part of us who helps determine right and wrong. It's the part of us who determines how to override our emotions and our fears. It is a part of us who guides us to use God's given gifts. The second one that we're going to talk about is going to be our family, who we love, our spouse, our children, our grandparents, our aunts, our uncles, our family on who we love and the importance of them. The third part is our church, who we do life with, who we get a sense of belonging and security with. Our church, who gives us spiritual growth and encouragement. Our church, a place where we can develop our gifts and our talents. Our church, a place where we get to learn about how to tell our story to others.